Welcome to Unfiltered, the show that separates the chaff from the facts. You have the questions and we bring you the answers. I am your host, Tariro Manamike. Zimbabwe is one of the countries in the world with at least 60 traceable minerals, including gold, platinum, lithium, diamond core, as well as nickel. Its diversified, educated people provide a valuable, efficient workforce that, coupled with its diversified economy, makes it an attractive destination for investment. And of course, not forgetting the favorable climate throughout the year. Some priority areas that we have to talk about include mining, manufacturing, tourism, ICT, as well as infrastructure development. To help us understand more on these issues and these areas and how they influence the growth trajectory of the country towards Vision 2030, we are at Zida offices, that Zimbabwe Investment Development Agency, to understand what is happening in Zimbabwe and where is Zimbabwe going. And my guest is the Chief Investment Promotion Officer, Silibaziso Chizwina. Welcome to Unfiltered.
Thank you, Tari, and welcome to Zida.
Thank you very much. Now, let's talk about how Zida was formulated. I understand it came into being in 2020.
Yes, we are a fairly new entity, young when you compare to other parastatals around. We come from an amalgamation of three entities. So the joint ventures unit, which was within the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development then, ZIMSEZA, which was a unit on its own, which dealt with special economic zones, and ZIA, which was the Zimbabwe Investment Authority. So I think government in its wisdom and having taken a look at how investment was coming into the country decided that they needed an agency which was focused on driving investment inward into the country. And so they formed this agency, Zida, in 2020. And I think we've been running as an agency since February of 2020. It hasn't been an easy journey. We've had a lot to do in terms of moving from three different agencies sitting in three different spaces, also being agencies with their own problems or issues at the time, but fractured information systems, fractured statistical systems. If you know anything about investment promotion, it's that you've got to have the data and stats at the tip of your hands. So for almost 2 years as an agency, we had to pull in all that information from these three big agencies, sit down and restructure how we promoted investment. I think initially when the head of the state came up with the idea and government approved the whole process, everybody thought that this agency was going to be the panacea for all the problems with the investment in the country. But we had a mammoth task because, the ease of doing business was a statement that was being loosely thrown around at the time. But what a lot of people in the country probably didn't understand was that it takes more than just this agency to get Zimbabwe to have moved up that ladder. Obviously, there have been changes to the structuring of the ease of doing business, with the changes to the World Bank structuring system. But as an agency, we continue to try and drive changes within the establishment of businesses in the country, how they reinvest in the country, and just creating visibility of the country as a whole.
Let's talk about your core mandate as well as your one-stop investment services center, because you talked about you coming together to reform how business is done in the country.
So our core mandate is really to drive investment into the country, foreign direct investment. But we also do not exclude domestic direct investment. I think we'll explain a little bit more about that. And I think the terminology one-stop shop investment center is one that a lot of people are aware of. So what does it mean? It basically means that at Zida right now, if you were to go into our operations department, which is probably one of our biggest departments, you will find represented within that office about 23 ministries, departments, and agencies critical to the establishment of a business in the country across all the sectors. So with our highest office being the Office of the President and Cabinet represented in the same office, different ministries, different agencies, ZIMRA, NASA, ZTA, and most importantly, the company's registry department, because any entity that wants to invest in the country needs to have a company registered here. So that one-stop shop service has been around since we established, and their main role is to facilitate, ensure that an investor comes in, gets licensed, gets all the relevant permits and paperwork in place, and establishes and starts operating, because that's the only way we'll see the difference happening after an investment is in place. And so that's been our mandate over the last 4 years. Importantly, I think that division also is the driving force behind our digitalization processes that we've undertaken in the last couple of years. So if you know anything about investment promotion agencies, what sets you apart in this world of, because we're jostling for a very, it looks like a big bucket of FDI, but it's getting smaller and smaller. So you have to find innovative ways in which you showcase your product. And the product is Zimbabwe. The brand, yes, that's driving it may be Zida. But what we've done is we've gone digital through the OSISC system. So almost all their operations are on digital platforms. So to access the OSISC unit right now, it's simply a click away on the Zida platform. And then I think the other core aspect of our operation is advocacy and protection of the investment once it's in the country. We have a unit that solely focuses on going through all the investment laws, trying to align them, checking where they're impeding or affecting investors, and then speaking to our principals through our CEO or through our chief legal officer. The unit that I lead is the investment promotion unit. So we are the outward facing unit. We go out there and we talk about what we have within the country, but we don't create that product. We have a unit that is business development and research that researches, sits down, and then puts together the product that we take to market. This is a system that has come to fruition in the last few months because we've had changes into the setup, but we're finding our space and our feet, and I think we're getting it right as an agency.
So how can one invest in Zimbabwe if they have free funds? Do we have a minimum or maximum that one can invest in any sector in the economy? And perhaps what is the criteria that one must meet in order to be classified as an investor?
So we get all sorts of inquiries in this, and I mean, they're not just foreign investors who are asking us. Our local companies, our local people want to understand how they can get involved in the process of investing in their own country. And first of all, we'd like to, if you see our report, it speaks to Zimbabwean investment because we actually license local companies as well. So that's something that we want to put out there, that we just don't license foreign investors alone. Even the local sector or local companies that want to get a Zida license can walk in and actually get that. It comes with a service. It's a gold chip service, but it makes it easy for a company to establish. So who's looking to invest in Zimbabwe right now? I think over the last couple of years, mining has been our biggest attraction to this country. Our natural resource base is highly extractive. But we also have tourism that is coming up, infrastructure development. So the interest in partnering government through the Triple-P process, again, a process that comes through this agency, which we help the government to go through, and the analysis of all these projects is done through us. Then we also have, obviously, our special economic zones. Another talking point, it's a product that we have here, which has been a pull for a number of investors who are interested in establishing manufacturing hubs, also maybe establishing tourism hubs, but agro-industrial. Okay. Highest interest after mining will probably be in the agricultural sector.
So we'll talk about these special economic zones when we come back after the break. You're tuned in to Unfiltered right here on ZBC, and today we are at the Zida offices, that's Zimbabwe Investment Development Agency, and we're talking to the Chief Investments Promotions Officer, Mrs. Silibaziso Chizwina, on the investments that are happening in Zimbabwe towards Vision 2030. We take a break, but stay with us. Welcome back to Unfiltered. And we're talking to Silibaziso Chizwina from Zida, Zimbabwe Investments Development Agency. Silibaziso, before we went for the break, you were just talking about the specific areas in which have been very attractive to foreign investors. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
So I think, Tari, the one that I spoke about before was mining. Huge interest, obviously, and mostly, I think, our investors coming in from the East. And in the last couple of years, lithium was a driving mineral. But government policy obviously has kind of slowed down that kind of interest because we are now looking at beneficiation. We still have quite a large number of investors coming in to say we'd like to establish lithium processing plants. So that's a new phase of investment into the mining sector that we are seeing. Like I said to you, the agro-industrial development space is one which a lot of investors are coming in and looking at. Particularly diasporan investors who are looking to come back home and establish in the country. Again, tourism is on our radar. We have a large number of infrastructure development projects. You may be aware that we do have a limited number of rooms in the country at the present moment. So it's a space that we'd like to cover as well by attracting the right kind of investor. And manufacturing, in certain spaces, you do have food production companies that are coming up and establishing in the country.
Yeah.
Of interest, and obviously for you, renewable energy, high point of discussion around a large number of investors who come in and establish independent power production plants. It's a long-term investment, and a lot of the investors are still in the process of establishing.
Can we talk about the minimum amount that one needs to have to invest in the country?
So at the present moment, we're looking at about $100,000. That's the kind of projects that we're looking at. It's an issue that we have looked at and said, in other countries around us in the region, in order to be licensed as an investor, you're looking at about $50 million minimum. But for us, because of the way we are set up, we have allowed people with even an investment of $100,000 to be licensed. But it's a process of understanding whether we should change it. Policy will be looked at. But at the present moment, at Zida, we accept that kind of investment.
We've got the national investment policy. And your team is out there, or your teams are out there scouting for investors, obviously putting Zimbabwe on the map as this attractive place to invest. In fact, a couple of days ago, Zimbabwe was listed in the top 10 countries in sub-Saharan Africa as an attractive investment destination. What sort of value are you selling about Zimbabwe?
It's always a question that we always have to ask ourselves every day to say, when we go out there, what are we saying about this place that we call home, that we call Zimbabwe, this place that we want to make an investment destination of choice in the world. We've put it out there and everything. One thing that we want an investor to understand is that we have the resources, the natural resources that they're looking for, which the rest of the world is looking for. We also talk about our weather. I mean, brilliant weather. You don't get that in a lot of spaces. So it's one of our selling points. Most of this country is very accessible. When you compare to what the rest of sub-Saharan Africa or, maybe the rest of Africa is, you can access at least 90 to 95% of this country. So an investor needs that accessibility. Also, like we are saying, we're trying to create the platforms for investors to come in unhindered. And so Zida is one of our selling points as a country, because we are now a port of entry for you as an investor. You've got direct access, even when you're sitting at home 24/7 in whichever continent you are. So that's one of our selling points as well. Mm-hmm. But again, to say that, yes, our systems may need upgrade and update, but they're there. We've got clear-cut systems about how to establish a company, how to to get registered with the local tax company, how to establish a social security registration. So we've got the systems in place. I think for us, it's just trying to make them move faster at the present moment. And so that's our selling point for the next few years that we're looking at. You
cater to foreign investors and, of course, local investors as well. You mentioned that earlier on when we started. Now, Zimbabwe has a majority youthful population. What are you doing for the youth of Zimbabwe?
So yes, Tari, I probably thought you'd ask that question because everybody wants to know. Our economy right now obviously is driven by a large number of SMEs that are operating. And we have sat down as an agency and said, our mandate is really inward investment that we're driving in. But, the investors do need to enable or to grow our local industries as well. And if we don't get our SMEs on board, we're going to lose out on the opportunity to grow our economy. So one of the things that our research and development unit is doing is to look at how to create a platform where SMEs in different sectors can come to the table or log in and be able to probably promote their projects or product or what should I say, startups. And then investors look at it and see whether they are viable or feasible. We would obviously look at how we could work with them to make these projects or products, attractive to investors. But it's long term. It's not something that we had on our tables per se, and it's a discussion that we have on the table at the present moment.
On that note, we take a short break, but we'll be right back. Welcome back to Unfiltered, and we carry on the conversation on the investments happening in the country right now. And before we went for the break, we're talking about the investments in the country. Can you tell us how many investors have received their licenses and what sort of impact that has had on the country as a whole?
Okay. So Tari, like I said, we've only recently been established. So 4 years ago, when our records were being put together, I think the system was showing close to about 5,000 licensed investors at the time. But we had to go through a cleanup process, obviously, who were still live, who were still working, who deserved to have a license, because we needed to do that. And I think our current records are circling around 2,000 plus in the system that we can safely say, we know where they are and what they're doing. In the last quarter alone, I think we took on about 413. I had the stats around there. But, when investors come in, we are able to track them now because of the way we have set up our system. 2023 was a very good year for us when we compared to 2022, because each quarter there was a movement of almost like 100% increase in the number of licensees that we were taking on board. Their impact obviously is something that is long-term. Investment is not overnight. One of the things that we do through our operations department is to monitor and evaluate the impact of an investment. And this is done through, currently we've set up a portal where an investor can actually report what they're doing. But we also have a team that goes out to the ground to verify and see how many people you have employed locally, what skills have you given to them, what technical equipment are you bringing in, or what technology are you bringing into the country.
So what happens when an investor, say at the point of applying for the license, says they're going to bring X technology, employ X number of people, but that doesn't happen a few years down the line? Of course, it's just been 4 years, but I'm pretty sure something has happened.
Mm-hmm. Just like in any business that is established anywhere in the world, things can go wrong, or there can be delays, which we have to take into account for, but they will be glaring, discrepancies where obviously somebody hasn't done something, or where an investor has failed to do something. But we do allow for an investor to be able to establish. We also take note of the fact that we also have other permit systems that are not necessarily Zida-led, which the investors have to do, and we give that allowance to them. But part of our monitoring and evaluation process allows us to be able to say, you're not doing what you said you would do. What does it mean? What have you gone out of spec? And if so, we are allowed to withdraw the license if there is no, clear reason for what is happening.
You bring up an important point, which is the licensing. Now, let's go to your website. When one visits your website, they're met with certain options on how to invest in the country, as well as that particular section talking about the investment licenses. What are these licenses? How do they work? And what are the renewal periods for these licenses? Of course, now we know that if you don't do what you have committed to doing, the license is going to be revoked.
It could be revoked, yes.
Yeah.
So we've got 3 types of investments that we sell. Like I said, we're putting out there into the market. So our general investments allows you to come into the country established in any kind of business. But, there are gray areas which are controlled by the Ministry of Industry and Commerce, certain sectors which are only available to our locals. Investors can apply to the Ministry of Industry and Commerce to get access to those sectors, but, they go through a process which is not always approved. But an investor can come in and establish and actually get 100% shareholdings in that particular company, and that's across different sectors. So that's a general investment license. And then you have special economic zone licenses, and these are for the general investments. They start from 2 to 3 years. Initially, we were at 1 year renewal, but we realized that it wasn't really helping our position as an ease of doing business space, and we've moved it to about 3 years. We also have what we're calling our special economic zone licensing, and these are 10-year licenses. So economic zones, by their own nature, very, very capital intensive, yeah. And you do spend a lot of time establishing and finding the right kind of investor. And normally, to actually fully develop the SEZ doesn't normally happen. So that's 10-year licenses for the developer, operator, and the investor. And then you obviously have your triple Ps. These are not really licensed per se. They go through a process of approval, and the stamp of approval is Cabinet's approval to proceed with the job. But they are notably registered here at Zida as having passed through us. So that's the licensing structure that we have. It comes at a cost, obviously. If you get a general investment license, it's $5,000, $500 just to do your application and upload it. And then once it's approved within the 2 to 3 days, 4,500. So that's something very important that I forgot to tell you.
It is impressive, 2 to 3 days, yeah?
Yeah. Initially, when we started, we were at about 40 days, and we moved it eventually last year. At the start of the year, we were at about 21. By the time we got to the end of the year last year, we were at 14, and this time we're reporting 4 to 5 days. And we're hoping that we'll have 48 hours as a set schedule for license processing very soon.
All right. Can you talk to us about some of the key investments that have been done in the country since the setting up of Zida? Perhaps you can give that answer by sector as well as by province in line with the devolution mandate.
Thanks very much, Terry. So one of the key issues that we've identified as Zida is that we need to empower our provinces. We've identified that each province has a unique offering, its own competitive and comparative advantage, and we've gone into the devolution process wholeheartedly, working with OPC and working with the permanent secretary who drives each of the provinces. And in so doing, what we do is we capacitate the provinces through training as Zida. We teach or help them to understand the value of their projects, to structure their projects to bankability stage. As a result, we can talk about some of the most impressive investments that we have had to deal with as an agency in the last 3 or 4 years. And I think one of them that everybody's talking about is the iron and steel one, driven by one of our big investors in the country, Denson. Obviously, we're expecting it to have ripple effects, not only in Zimbabwe, but in the region as a whole. And one of the things that we should be seeing very soon is a reduction, hopefully, in the cost of certain downstream activities that rely on steel. So our construction sector should be feeling the impact of having this big plant in Zimbabwe. We should be monitoring these things and getting them products that come out of steel, nails, for instance, even metal plates that we have not been able to produce in the country.
Silibaza, so thank you so much for taking your time to speak to us on this particular issue. I'm sure it is not the last time that we'll be speaking to you. We'll be following you up to measure the progress.
Thank you, Terry, and we look forward to having you back at Zida, and I'm hoping that we'll have more interesting news to share with you when you come back.
Of course. Now, on that note, we've come to the end of this particular episode of Unfiltered with me, your host, Tariro Manamike, where we were looking at the Zimbabwe Investment Development Agency's progress, letting us know what is happening in the country towards Zimbabwe's Vision 2030, the growth trajectory. If you have any issues that you would like to know about, of course, you can let us know, and we'll bring the answers to you. Happy watching, and thank you for watching.